In front of 63,000 people, Andry Rajoelina, the Malagasy president, gave a report on his first 100 days as head of state and intends to keep his campaign promises for the benefit of the most vulnerable households. On Saturday evening, an agreement was reached to create a joint council to govern instead of the militaries, and 48 hours is the new deadline as agreed by the opposition and the Transitional Military Council to define a certain number of points. These are our top stories. Stay tuned for more details in this newscast. Andry Rajoelina delivered a speech on Sunday at the Antananarivo Sports Palace before 63,000 Malagasy, where he reported on his first 3 months in power. It is a political exercise to which the Malagasy president complied with. It was all about making an assessment on his actions as head of state after 100 days in power, disclosing his priorities and also reporting on what has already been done. He mentioned several campaign promises which would improve the living conditions of his compatriots, guaranteeing investment and promoting development. Politically, despite the setback of the Constitutional High Court, which had rendered an unfavorable opinion on the holding of the referendum that was to be organized at the same time as the legislative elections, the ambition of the president to counsel the Senate remains unchanged. He aims at taking back the 43 billion budget allocated to this institution for economic development through the financing of access to water, electricity, and universities. He wants to continue his decentralization project by replacing regional chiefs who were until now elected by governors, but from now on will be appointed. In agriculture, Andry Rajoelina mentioned one example of the promises he made on lowering the selling price of imported rice, which he intends to keep for the benefit of the most vulnerable households. Among his announcements, one of the most important was the increase of the minimum income salary, which would now amount to 50 euros instead of 42. But prior to the achievement of this objective, a meeting with the operators of the private sector will be held this week, Tuesday, in order to agree on this increase. He also plans to lower the price of fuel and start a standoff with the oil sector, which he believes has far too high margins. The Malagasy president insisted on his desire to achieve 100% of his campaign commitment to the population through the thematic conventions. Tens of thousands of people were under siege Sunday in the north of Mozambique by the destructive rise of waters following the cyclone Kenneth, a cyclone that has already killed at least 5 people and significant material damage. Heavy rains continue to pour over the entire Cabo Delgado region, causing the first flood in different areas of Pemba, the provincial capital, and the surroundings. Numerous fields on the edge of the city have been flooded with water, and the main road from Pemba to the Tanzanian border to the north after Idai cyclone in Beira 6 weeks ago. 1,000 miles further north, it is now the turn of Pemba, with its 400,000 inhabitants under threat. According to the provisional balance sheet published on Sunday by the Mozambican Institute of Emergency Management, 5 people are reported dead. More than 23,000 are homeless, and nearly 35,000 homes were partially or completely destroyed. The World Flood Program has begun distributing food intake to the victims but had to suspend its operations towards the most remote areas due to road cuts. A helicopter is expected in Pemba to allow them to resume as soon as possible. The area struck by Kenneth is much less populated than Beira, that was devastated by Idai. However, the region has been very fragilized for a year and a half by the deadly raids of a jihadist group that the army can hardly control. 48 hours is a new deadline granted by the opposition and the Transitional Military Council to define a number of points. On Saturday evening, an agreement was found to create a joint council that will govern instead of militaries. But most of its terms are still to be negotiated. On the other side, the Islamic revolt against the outcome of these negotiations. On Sunday in Khartoum, the two sides met again during the new discussions. At the heart of this meeting, the duration of the transition, the opposition represented by civilians are looking to a longer period, up to 4 years, but the military council plans to take only 2 years to put Sudan back on the path of democracy. So there are the terms like Joint Council of Sovereignty to negotiate first the number of its members, then the discussion of its composition between civilians and soldiers, the competences attributed to each one, but especially the choice of the one who will embody the head of the council. This function remains essential in these negotiations because the boss of the Joint Council will have to assume all the functions which affect the national sovereignty. But since the announcement of negotiations and agreements found this weekend, the Sudanese Islamic Party revolts. In a press conference on Sunday, the party says it does not recognize the coalition that should lead the transition and call for the appointment of a Christian as prime minister. For the Islamic Party, no political force has the right to impose proposals to military council, nor to exclude a party. This council, which will be established very soon, will replace the current transitional military council, will have as its main mission to form a transitional civilian government, will be the supreme authority, and will therefore pave the way for the first election after the departure of al-Bashir. Kenyan world record holder Eliud Kipchoge once again proved his superiority by winning the London Marathon for the fourth time in an exceptional time as a mark of serenity. This is what Kenyan Eliud Kipchoge proposed to his competitors, suffering but finally won, all along the 42.195 kilometer of the London Marathon, winning in 2 hours, 2 minutes 37 seconds of a very highly competitive race. The King Kipchoge seems untouchable on the Queen of Races.
In London Marathon, so I need to enjoy running the 202, which was actually I missed in my credentials. And my business is simple. I don't have anything now for now, but I need to go back, sit with my coach, with the management, and see what next. But for now.
On the women's side, Kenyan's Brigidi Kosgei clinched her first win in London in 2 hours, 18 minutes, 20 seconds, ahead of her compatriot Vivian Cheruiyot and Ethiopia's Rosa Dereje.
Yeah, I hope when I prepared well, I will break that record, and hope next season I will run well to improve more than what I have done today.
Farther off from the lead group, from the 25th kilometer, local idol Mo Farah has long threatened to beat his own European record set in Chicago win last year. But with a 5th place in 2 hours, 5 minutes, 39 seconds, he failed at 28 seconds of his record. In front of 63,000 people, Andry Rajoelina, the Malagasy president, gave a report on his first 100 days as head of state and intends to keep his campaign promises for the benefit of the most vulnerable households. On Saturday evening, an agreement was reached to create a joint council to govern instead of the militaries, and 48 hours is the new deadline as agreed by the opposition and the Transitional Military Council to define a certain number of points. That's all for our newscast today. Stay tuned on Gabon 24 for more news.